Hello, everyone. Courtney Morris here from ARTiFACTS. I thought maybe we could get rolling. It looks like we're at 11 o'clock and several people on the line, so we'll try to start punctually here. Thanks, everybody, for joining. It's great to have you. I've got with me one of my co-founders, Dave Kachalko. He'll introduce himself in just a second. As I said, I'm Courtney. Just a couple quick things on my background. I was at Thomson Reuters for over a decade. Spent a lot of time in their science and academic businesses, which is part of the business that did own the Web of Science. That's become Clarivate now. I'm in addition doing a lot of other things, including healthcare, but product development, marketing strategy, business development were a lot of the things I've done there, including and then most recently I've been running a software as a service business in the healthcare space until we decided to co-found ARTiFACTS. So Dave, you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Sure. Thanks, Courtney. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. Dave Kachalko here. Similar with Courtney, I have spent a number of years with the Thomson Reuters organization, formerly Thomson, and which is now Clarivate. I was there at the birth of Web of Science. I led the bibliographic software business, EndNote, Reference Manager, ProCite side of those products for a number of years, and worked in various other roles in strategy and market and product development. Together with Howard Ratner, who I see is also on today's session. Nice to see you there, Howard. We co-founded ORCID a few years ago and are pleased with the success that ORCID has had in the research ecosystem. And we're very pleased today to show you a bit more about ARTiFACTS that we just recently launched.
Great, thanks, Dave. So we won't spend a ton of time. We'll jump into the system here in just a second, but thought it might make sense just to provide a little context in terms of what we're really trying to do. As we've been in this, market in this space for a long time, we have the view that the processes that we're using today are relatively inefficient, retrospective, and incomplete, and that the current indexes and archives are really capturing just a portion of a lot of the output that researchers produce, a lot of the good, valuable, meaningful output. And that stuff happens as it is captured now, retrospectively, where these linkages are made, and then there's some inconsistencies and some inefficiencies. And so we've thought for a long time that there should be a better way to do it. And also because much of today's scholarly communication really focuses around the published article, and not in any way that's bad, but we've felt for a long time that there's a lot more beyond the published article that is meaningful and valuable. And so at some level we're trying to shift that lens from just the published article being the thing that matters to really everything that is everything that adds value, anything that somebody could use, anything that advances knowledge is valuable and should be findable. So because the systems today generally miss a lot of this other output, it's not indexed, it's hard to find. If it is findable, sometimes it just sits on laptops and doesn't get out into the world, and therefore it can't help further research. People can't find it, can't build on it, and then also importantly, it can't be cited, so it can't help build reputation in any meaningful way for researchers. And we've long believed that there's no secret, but that researchers trade in reputation. I mean, it's very much how they get grants, how they continue to do good work, how they advance, get tenure, etc. And so the ARTiFACTS system really is trying to liberate a lot of this knowledge and also allow reputations to build in real time. So what we're going to show you is our version 1 MVP product that is simple, user-friendly, that allows the establishment and maintenance of a lot of these linkages just right from the beginning, from a grant application or even before. And then, what we've really tried to build in here is the rigorous and authoritative management of a lot of these linkages. So citations, the establishment and management of IP. And because we aren't by any means, blockchain experts, but as we have gotten to know the distributed ledger technology, we actually felt that technology could be brought to bear in a lot of the problems that we see. So through our distributed transaction engine on the DLT and Ethereum blockchain, we're recording the permanent, valid, and immutable chain of records that blockchain's known for. But for all of these artifacts and for the transactions around them as it relates to attribution. And we like to put Eugene Garfield in a lot of our descriptive material, just because we all worked with Eugene back in the day at ISI and Thomson, and so in a way we feel like we're kind of trying to help carry on and make his vision complete. He was one of the founders and the godfathers of bibliometrics, and he talks about citations as the currency, making payments in the form of citations. And that's something that has been part of what we've been trying to do. So at the heart, we're trying to do three simple things here out of the gate. Enabling research and scientists to establish proof of existence and confirm provenance at any time. Protect and manage their IP while facilitating knowledge and content sharing. And then provide and receive the valid break-proof attribution and assignment of credit. And so, Dave, let me pause. Do you want to redirect or add, supplement?
No, I think that's a great introduction and overview of the thinking that we've brought to ARTiFACTS. And why don't we segue to the product? One thing I probably should mention to everyone is I think we have all the participants muted, but we are monitoring the Q&A panel. So if you do have questions along the way here, please feel free to ask those.
Dave, you're seeing the website, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just gonna pop in now to the system, but I'll do it via the website. So we're just live here, but so I'm going to go to the system, and then I'm going to sign in. So I should have my credentials here. And any of you who have used Center for Open Science's OSF system, you'll see obvious similarities, as I think everybody knows, but I'll just state it. We forked the OSF open source system because as we started speccing and building what we thought we were going to need, it was clear to us that we needed a good researcher-specific collaboration space. And as we explored the OSF system, it had a lot of what we would have had to have built anyway. So we, did spend some time talking to OSF about, maybe the best ways to come at this and, how to, think about it and what we might be able to do in the future going forward. But so right now we have forked it and we've built a lot of additional things into it. But we've also taken the approach that we're engineering and building with giving us the option to merge this back into OSF, particularly once some of these things have proven out and we've made them kind of right and tight. So what you'll see here is my dashboard, and I ski a bit, so all the stuff I've been goofing around on in terms of setting up projects add a little bit of a skiing motif to them. So and because we're also a cross-disciplinary platform, and specifically cross-disciplinary. Picking a discipline as an example, it might have felt like favoritism, so I picked one that was decidedly not academic. But as you click into this project, Ski More Pal, what you'll see is a basic kind of project overview page. You've got the contributors that have been established here. Myself as a principal investigator, Dave, and we'll talk about contributors and contributor management here in a bit and some of the additional metadata that we're adding. And there's a wiki, and we look at that quickly, just in terms of just describing what the project's about, et cetera. And then, other elements that are here are an ability to set up any number of custom components for organization of the various streams of work. You can, pretty easily add one if, sticking with the theme, and you can bring the tags in or the contributors from the main project, any of the licensing characteristics, and then that shows up now as a component, and then you can manage permissions and public-private elements at the component level differently. So if, for instance, now right now I have made this project public. So it's the tag here is make private. So that would then bring it back in privately. But you can also manage elements at the component level. So if you want to provide, you want to put out a data set, you want to put out, grant application, or you want to put out certain things, you can just make a component that is, says public, and then make that component public, and then others can find it, rely on it, work on it, but importantly cite it. And we'll show some of that here in just a second. The other elements that you'll see here, the ability to add different tags, of course, to help find, help people find your work more easily, but then the basic file structure. And so, right now there is a ARTiFACTS provided storage capability. You can also link in Dropbox, Amazon, Google Drive, etc. I've put a couple, again, kind of silly pictures in there. And this is tracking activity through the project, giving citation notations in terms of how you would cite anything in here, and then below also we've got a Mendeley library added in. Dave went through and pulled in, and he's a collaborator on the project, so he linked his Mendeley account in, and then he pulled in some papers from his Mendeley library, and that all shows here on our, kind of our main landing page. Dave, I'll pause for a second and see if you want to add anything.
Maybe just a couple thoughts there, and we'll see this when we look in a bit on the add-ons tab. Those of you who know me and the background that I mentioned, my ties to EndNote, we very much look forward to being able to integrate with EndNote as well. This system currently interfaces with Mendeley and Zotero. But the intention, of course, is for this system to interface with all of the relevant tools that scholars and researchers are using, bibliographic software being one of those categories. And we'll talk a bit more about those shortly.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Dave. And thanks for the questions that are coming in, and I'll try to work some of those answers in here as we go along, but keep them coming, and Dave will also be looking at those, and we'll lob in with various answers. One question was, if something is private, what is being then logged into the blockchain? And so I'll come on to that in just a second. And then there was another question about Ethereum, whether it's a public or private blockchain. What I'm going to show you today is on a Ethereum testnet, because there are transaction costs as it relates to the Ethereum public network. But we are, the system will be 100% on that public Ethereum blockchain, to where you'll be able to, anything you transact, you can just go onto an Ethereum viewer, and you can see the hash, and you can see when it posted, and when it was on there. And we'll talk in just a second about what actually gets shown, and what some of those levers are, and some of the things that were also coming in the pipeline that will give a little more flexibility to that. The files tab is really just another view at kind of the core file structure. One thing that this icon here is doing is it's now going to pull up another screen, and because the time when we launched a couple weeks ago at the Population Health Colloquium. Another part of the solution that we launched for the population health community generally was a specific archive for that community to collaborate. Similar to some of the other discipline, like the physics archive or sociorepic or some of those. And so in this case, anything can be specifically sent to that archive as well from here. So particularly for people in the population health community, they can send that directly into that population health community archive. And that will build over time into other disciplines. Though I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about the wiki. It's fairly standard. You can build in images or other descriptions as the project evolves, or other kind of notice boards. I will spend just a minute here on managing contributors, because this is an important part of not only just general research project management, but also some of the specific things that we're trying to do differently. So right now I set this up, and then Dave is a contributor. And as terms of permission rights, administrator, read, write, and read, fairly basic. I was default administrator, but I could, Dave could take over and I could fall out. Some of the other things that we have added are some different descriptions about, what role a person plays inside the project. One thing that we're trying to do is add some dimensionality to people's roles, because in the current world, a citation is a citation, and you don't really know anything about it. You don't know who, what role anybody played, or kind of what they did, what their level of engagement was. And, and this could change a little bit over time, but, Dave and I, so I put myself as principal investigator, same as Dave. And then, further, again, taking a fairly standard view of what some of the core areas are, this is some more dimensionality. Maybe, I worked on maybe I worked on methodology, and maybe I worked on, doing some software. And those were the things that I did. And then the other thing that we've added here is an ability to put some descriptor in terms of level of efforts, so that, some of those, again, more dimensionality could be deployed and used depending on what disciplines may want to do. So, I was high on methodology and maybe medium in software. And Dave, right now I've got him as, writing, review, and editing, but, whatever the case may be, you can fill out some of those additional levels of metadata that could help define what a person's role is, so that there's more of that available. Now, adding a contributor's, well, it does want me to save. So before I go do that, so I'll save those, and then I'll add a contributor. In this case, I'll add another version of Dave, actually, because he is, it's not wonderful. So I'll add Dave, and then I'll give him read and write right now. I'll give him, all of those access, and now the other Dave Kichalko will show up, and I can give him, a co-investigator role, or I can, give him something else here. Now, if you're adding somebody who's not in the system, that's fine. You'll just, give them a name, and you'll need an email address, and then the system will invite them to participate, and will then, basically add them to the project in that way. And you can just give them read only if you want, or you can give them whatever rights that you'd really like to add. So from a contributor perspective, Dave, anything else you want to add? Any questions you want to answer?
Sure. Well, a couple things to add in here that, as you see here, folks, we've added in the ability to include additional metadata around an artifact, metadata that is not typically available in a bibliographic reference, if you will. And of course, what we have, this model that we're showing here, is one that will change over time as we continue to engage with, various scholarly and scientific disciplines and scientometricians and others to build into this system a more comprehensive or standard set of metadata, and or adapt the system so that it is more discipline specific or relevant. Certain disciplines may wish, for example, on the level of contribution, may wish to use quantitative indicators. Others may prefer a different approach. And so the model here is one where we are very interested in following the guidance that the research community has provided thus far, that including this additional contextual information ultimately enriches the content that a bibliographic reference or citation will contain.
Got it. Great. Thanks, Dave. Now, add-ons. Dave, you want to keep going on add-ons?
Oh, sure. So add-ons. The concept here, and this very much carries forward the vision that the open science framework has provided. Currently, the system it interfaces with really two types of third-party or external systems and services. Storage is one, and as you see here, the list of some of the services that OSF supports: Dropbox, Google Drive for just generic artifacts, and GitHub specifically as a code repository. Storage is one of those categories, and citations is a second. And again, currently the system supports both Mendeley and Zotero, and once EndNote has released its own web-based API that enables this kind of interface, EndNote would be a third type of bibliographic software application that the system would work with. So an important point to add about storage is that at ARTiFACTS ourselves, we're not requiring that any researcher store their information on our servers. We certainly will make that capacity available to the research community, but there's no need to have all of that content on our servers, which I think is an important point. We want to maintain a system that is flexible and works with the currently used systems and services that researchers are using. And similarly with citation, the bibliographic citation software, that's just one category of third-party applications that we envision integrating with. So another category of those that we intend to build out interface support for, an API and interface support for example, would be electronic library notebooks, right, where there is already a pre-existing set of pools and files of artifacts using the non-branded spelling of the word that exist in researchers' lab notebooks, and we very much intend to interface the system with those tools as well as others. So what you will see over time is that this set of add-ons, both in terms of number of services in the area of citations and storage that we interface with, will grow, as well as the different types of third-party applications that we will build support for. And probably another point worth mentioning here that, as Courtney highlighted up front, that thus far, this portion of the workflow system is leveraging the open science framework from the Center for Open Science, if you know that system. And our intent, as we fork that code, our intent is to merge back in. So the added functionality that ARTiFACTS is bringing to this system is able to be accessed and used by the broader community that is using OSF. So at the moment, we've not yet completed that merge, but that's very much in our near-term plans.
And again, a couple specific questions on this topic that were asked. There was a question about Storj, a blockchain-based cloud storage. We're exploring several other kind of distributed storage opportunities, including IPFS, Interplanetary File System. There's Storj was one, and there's one other one that I just forgot that we were also just looking at because I think a lot of these look like they could be pretty interesting and a great way to store a lot of this material in a secure and distributed way. So as we continue to build out some of these add-ins, some of these other distributed storage things are definitely on our list. So kind of a yes, but not yet answer on that. And then, a specific question around ResearchGate and, would be integrated there. There are several of the other community sites, ResearchGate's one, academia.edu, and then, of course, ORCID itself around the, researcher ID and profiles that are built in there. There are several of those, all those mentioned are on our list for us to go and try to get some integration in, because what we're really trying to do is, again, make this as easy as possible, because certainly our research and focus groups and, everything that we know about this is the easier the better, and researchers don't want to double enter stuff, anything that can be linked and already entered in just one place. It's important for us to figure all of those linkages out, and we are committed to doing that. Now, of course, some of those are, kind of two-way streets. So we may be able to get some of them and may not be able to get some of them kind of in due course, but we're definitely going down that path. And there was another question about just file types generally, what types the system will accept. I mean, really for all practical purposes, any type of file can be brought in. I'm going to transition just here quickly to, just a little bit of some of the files that are in here, and I'll just show you how proof of existence works, because proof of existence is obviously a key component of what we're really trying to make easy, so that there is, again, that level of security around something. So I brought in an image. This was Kevin, one of our other co-founders, and myself, from our launch conference, and I've already hashed that document. So I'd already hit proof of existence. Here's the hash, and so that one's already there. I did bring in another one that I haven't hashed, just so we could see it. Just an old picture that I had. Now, if I hit proof of existence here, basically the system takes a unique fingerprint of that file, and it posts it now out onto the blockchain. You can see the Ropsten Ether scan here, which is the test net. And right now it's saying it hasn't been able to locate the transaction hash, but I think it just needs to cycle. And Dave, are you seeing the Ether scan page when I shift to it?
Yes, it's appearing.
Okay, good. Let's see if this one shows up in Etherscan. So here's the past transaction showing up on the Etherscan, and you'd use this same Etherscan tool on the live Ethereum public blockchain as well. I just wouldn't say Ropsten; it'd be the main one. And so now that has been established, immutably on the blockchain. The fingerprint has been taken. If there's any question about time or place, now that's going to be more easily established and handled should you need to ever do that. And it also just provides a little more confidence in terms of putting things out there, because again, a big part of what we want to do is we want people to feel confident that sharing some of their early work has some upside. But one, it needs to be easy and safe. And then two, is the other loop of this, and I'll hit the transact button here. and that is around attribution or citation. So, in this case, again, I showed earlier that we had a Mendeley library loaded in. These are the specific artifacts that are in the current project. So, I could self-cite those. I won't. But, in this list that came in from our Mendeley library, if I pick a couple of those and say, okay, we actually, we want to provide those citations, and we want to provide them now because, one, we're using them now, and they've added value, can hit that transact button, and then that will go, and then we can go over to our history of proof of attributions. And, we can see that we've got a list of the attributions that we have provided. And again, clicking over, we can see the transaction ID on that, and we can follow those. And so, this gives an ability for, researchers to not only put their stuff out there so others can find it, but when you find some good stuff and it might not be a published paper, you can provide an attribution for it. And this is, this to us is such a core part of what we think, the community has been asking for in terms of helping build their reputations in real time, not waiting through too long publishing cycles to see citations of some of your work, several years later, but that we can facilitate this stuff in a way and deploying blockchain that makes it easy, safe, secure, and beneficial at the same time. Dave, you want to add anything else on this point?
Well, a couple of things. Well, maybe let me come back to a couple of questions actually that have been asked. Some of these came in earlier and here most recent. But one question concerns. Well, the question is who pays for this? Researchers, publishers, universities, etc. Those are the questions. And this system is available free at the point of use for researchers. That is the if you will, the operating model that we have. So researchers will not be paying for the service. And there's a related question about cost here, which is, well, who pays for the registering or the transacting of this information into the blockchain? And again, that will not be the researcher. As it relates to costs in the blockchain, some of the what we're discussing and evaluating internally is how best to transact this information. As Courtney showed earlier with the example transaction, it hadn't yet registered into the testnet. And we're looking at various models of batching and transacting in bulk to gain economies and so forth with the system. But it will be available at no charge to researchers. Over time, we would expect as use of this system grows and as users grow and as different communities and stakeholders in the research environment begin to use and rely on this system, that ARTiFACTS will introduce subscription services for the institutions that would gain access to the system, whether they be universities or publishers or funding organizations and so forth. There's another question here, great question on how would some of the traditional indexing systems and services interface with ARTiFACTS. Specifically, it asks about Scopus and Clarivate Analytics, and there I think the reference is to Web of Science. And one of what we think is important to point out here is that our focus is not on the downstream published work and output that results from research efforts, but really it's on the upstream portion of the work where researchers are generating and creating these various artifacts. And what we view is that this system will be highly complementary with other existing bibliographic or citation-based indexes of the published literature, where what this system will enable researchers and ARTiFACTS to do on their behalf in collaborating with publishers and with indexers is to connect the body of artifacts created from these research projects that ultimately culminate in a published work with those published works, whether that's for subsequent verification or reproducibility or value, or whether it's used by funding organizations to help them assess what worked, what didn't work, what they want to fund and modify in future funding award programs and so forth. So we view this system as highly complementary with Scopus, PubMed as a bibliographic database, Web of Science, and other systems.
Great, thanks, Dave. Were you going to say something else, Dave?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Now I'm hearing an echo. Is everybody else hearing that? No, it sounds like we're better. So I popped back up to the high level here, and I thought I'd just demonstrate a little bit about how this will ultimately play out. So, and now I'm really searching the broader archive, artifacts archive, where things that have been made public now can be found. And so there's this individual, whose name I won't say because I'll butcher it, has put in a project called the Peace Ball Project, and he or she has made that public. And so, now, you can go, explore it and kind of see what it's about. And had there been any, other artifacts, or files, or pieces of work that had been made public, you'd be able to see them. But you can, you could also now, reach out to this individual if there was a collaboration opportunity. But if there was something that had been, made public from an artifact perspective, now you could see that, and now you could bring it by association into your project, and then you could also provide it a citation if it was something that was valuable. And so, as we drive and build usage here, and focus on getting more researchers sharing that early work, that corpus of prospective information and the ability to find it, use it, and cite it will grow. And we think just because of some of that reputational impact and the fact that it's safe and easy, that at least that all the discussions we've been having with research and the research community to date suggest that adoption can be relatively rapid. Dave, you want to add anything else?
No, although a question has come up. One of our participants will have to jump off, and the question is, will the webinar be available offline later? And the answer to that is yes.
Okay, great. So, Dave, why don't we just make sure we've picked up the questions and that we've provided the answers. Why don't we just both scroll?
Yeah, scan through.
Well, so there was a question about storage and what happens if something is deleted, and how that might impact the citations to that. So it's a great question, and one, in fact, we were debating this amongst ourselves at some length yesterday about the best way to deal with off-site storage. The reality, of course, is if you're in an off-site storage place and you do a proof of existence and you've got a unique hash and that gets posted, and then that file gets deleted, well, that proof of existence obviously then has no value because you couldn't recreate the hash and you couldn't prove its existence. What we are likely to do, particularly once we have built in some more interplanetary file system or other distributed storage mechanisms, our plan is we will keep a source file just in what I'd say deep archive, obviously, not for use or anything, but only for the purpose of matching it to a particular hash, should the owner of that need it. And if we're able to do that in again, a blockchain-based distributed storage network, all the better. IPFS has obviously got some promise in that regard as well. And it would be a similar thing to make sure that the citations and those linkages continue to be there. What the ideal world is there's a persistent ID, whether that's an ARC or anything else that we could point to. That's really the best scenario. But of course, in those interim or gray area cases, having a deep archive of that will make some of that a little bit easier. Dave, you want to elaborate on that one at all?
No, I think that addresses that question. I'm just looking at a couple of others that have come in here. One of which is there any thought of adding a micropayment element for artifacts as they're cited? Is there anything that will remunerate researchers for their work? And great question. Something that we are currently discussing and debating amongst ourselves, and a question that we're taking to we're taking back to the research community as well. As many of you may already be familiar, of course. We're not a cryptocurrency such as a Bitcoin, but the blockchain is a technology that supports the use of tokens that can be used for exchange of service and transaction related activity, and so this question is spot on. And there are systems that are using tokens to incent and reward various crowdsourcing activities. We may find over time that the artifact system is one that lends itself to that. It's something that we're looking at, but we've not yet made a definitive decision there.
And one thing I'll add just on that point as well is, we have, as we read what's coming out in space and what people have been talking about, one thing that we definitely do not want to do, and one of kind of our very kind of core principles, is we want research to be unconstrained, and we want it to be open, and want it to be fair. But we won't. There'd be no circumstance under which we would compensate anybody, for instance, for providing citations. That is a thing that to us, just feels like it would distort the research process. Now, if there are other, there's a lot of proposals in the research space about, well, should peer reviewers, should they be compensated in some way? I mean, look, that's a great question, and one that the research community could, very easily rally around, and something that our platform eventually could also facilitate and allow. But in the case of some of the core elements of, peer review process, or, the kind of that citation element, we wouldn't provide any type of compensation on that. In our view, the, that core element of that, going back even to Garfield, where it's really a motivation driven by wanting to, kind of pay forward your use of somebody else's work, is the reason for a citation, and that ought to be the same for somebody giving citations to your work where they found it valuable and they wanted to provide that. I just want to make that clarification.
Yeah.
There was one that I think I probably didn't answer very well as it related to marked private into the blockchain. So it's a great question, because do you want to associate yourself publicly with an artifact that you might do a proof of existence, or would you rather be anonymous? Right now, you are anonymous in terms of what is posted into the blockchain. So you just see that big hash, and nobody knows if they are to query the blockchain, they're not going to see who the person was. But in the coming, couple weeks, maybe even faster, we'll have a toggle on there, because there's benefits to having some of that associated. There could be benefits to having that identity known at the time. should you want to do it. And so our view on you could do either. You could be anonymous, or you could be named.
Very good. And there's a follow-on question around providing an incentive for peer review, and I think as Courtney described, we're not likely to go down the path of using a token-based system as an incentive for peer review. However, we do see this artifact system becoming highly relevant during peer review, or really for any subsequent validation oriented research study or reproducibility studies, where the collection of research outputs that have resulted and are associated with a discovery, whether it's communicated in an archive, such as a physics archive, as a discovery and subsequently followed by a publication, or via publication, we view that this pool of information of artifacts can be used quite extensively during peer review to support and facilitate a peer review activity. So certainly yes, there.
There's one other thing that the micropayment question spurred, which is in one of our focus groups, we did have, there was, I remember the guy who said, hey, couldn't I had this great data set, couldn't I put it out there and say, hey, this is available, but I actually want to get, $5 or whatever for you to, every time you use it, because I spent a lot of time on it. And, we think that is, absolutely something that should be possible. It's not something that, frankly, we will have the capability to do for a bit. It's a little farther down the development pipeline, but I think that the idea of, again, in our vision of researchers being able to, really manage their IP as they see fit, and build reputations in real time, that is highly consistent with the way we see the world.
Mm-hmm. One other question that I just skipped over earlier, the question is what file types will the system accept? If we didn't already answer that, there's no restriction on file type. So virtually any type of artifact that you would envision generating during the course of the research that you're conducting can be connected with this system. So there are no constraints there.
And there was another good question about kind of badge, badge-like capabilities, or community ratings in a kind of an altmetric way. It's a great question. One that, again, we've been debating quite heavily over the past couple of weeks, because there are obviously certain elements that require community engagement and contribution of things, and maybe bringing in past work, and those elements that would really help make this a robust index. And as we said earlier, the research community has shown that they can mobilize quickly in building some of these archives. And I think ResearchGate's an example. Of course, now I think the research community is waking up and saying, hey, we built this thing, and now somebody else owns it, and now they want to, they're making money off our backs again. We're, at some level, we're trying to avoid that. And of course, the IP part of what ResearchGate's struggling with now, with publishers, suing to take copyrighted stuff down. We also, really want to focus on the index part of that, and, point to documents where it makes sense. But the badge-like thing is one that I wouldn't be surprised if we deploy that in a way that is further engagement and recognition of people's work as it relates to the broad index.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I think it's scanning through. I'm thinking we have addressed everything is there anything we've missed?
I think we've got them. If you had a question and you don't think we hit it, pop that back and we'll grab it right now. But I think that looks like all of them. And if there are no other questions, as Dave said, we will be posting, sending all registered users, link to the webinar. And so you'll be able to see the recorded one if you are so inclined. And then, there was one last question came in about, a lot of systems that researchers use, and how do we try to get to, how are we going to get artifacts kind of top of mind on that? That's a great question, and one in terms of the building the network effect that's important as we further develop our go-to-market strategy. But there's a lot of ways we think about that as we are going. And some of them we talked about a little bit earlier, which is one, making it easy and integrated into some of these other workflows. We, again, want to be very tied in to how researchers are doing their work, which is, why we're, very, very high on the list are, the Mendeley, Zotera's, EndNotes, and, some of the other reference manager products. I mean, even Word or, Google Docs, we'd like to be able to have a little API functionality there too, where just even out of there, you might be able to transact something. But then also some of the existing repositories and profiling areas are high on our list, as well as, from a discipline perspective, a lot of the existing archives, whether it's SocioRepic or, Chem Archive or Physics Archive or whatever they may be, there's several discussions that we have underway with some of these in terms of getting those communities to come in and deploy this system to establish their proof of existence, and then start to more securely manage a lot of those early works. Obviously it's an area that's very important to us, is to really build that network effect, and between a lot of the research communities themselves, some of the repositories, and then there are also funders that will be that we are talking to who are quite interested in using the ARTiFACTS system to keep track of a lot of that research that gets done that they're funding. And if when a few funders engage and say, hey, we want you to use this system because we want to keep track of everything that's done, and then there may be an ability to improve workflows around funding through some of the smart contracting functionality that is available on Ethereum. That will also start to be an important tide shift, just in terms of keeping all these things together and accessible and citable. Dave, what else would you add on that? It felt like that was a ramble on my part, but maybe.
Just to round it out, I think what you'll see, it's a great question, and we certainly understand that the importance of this system interfacing with the existing tools and different systems that researchers are using, where there's no need to introduce this different interface into their work stream, but actually to dovetail how this system works with those tools. That's exactly what we'll be looking to do, and you'll see and learn of that in the form of various APIs that we make available from this system, and that we connect with and implement for those other tools. So we're very interested in learning from the community of the tools that they're using that they would like to see interfaced with ARTiFACTS, and we'd be happy to prioritize those in and introduce those as their development unfolds.
So, with that, thanks again for everybody for joining and for the good questions, and happy to hear your feedback, and we hope to pop on, use the system, and tell your friends.
Thank you all.